I'm here today with Karl of Nile. Unreal. I can't believe that I'm here with such an iconic legend in the world of death metal to talk about the underworld awaits us all, out August 23rd on Napalm Records. And I really want to get things started with that title, The Underworld Awaits Us All, which I took as death is inevitable. Is it?
As far as I know, it is.
But does that, like, for as inevitable as death is, do you spend time thinking about it? Is there a topic that pops in your mind frequently?
Well, I think of it like this: like it's inevitable, and it's going to happen, regardless of whatever I think about it. Whatever I think about it will not change the outcome. We're all going to die, and whatever it is that happens, which who can say for sure? I don't know. You don't know. Nobody can say because no one ever comes back to tell us what happens. So, wherever it is that we, as metal people, listening to, playing metal, the band, the fans, wherever that place is, we'll probably be there together. Wherever that is. I don't know. Who can say?
Does that give you a sense of comfort, knowing that we'll all be there together?
Well, I think we have to take what comforts are available to us, and that seems to be one of them. I don't think there's a separate underworld for everybody, right? I think we'll just be tossed in there together.
Oh, now they got me thinking. But moving on from this dark thought of death and demise, I have to ask you about the artwork. Impressive artwork on this record. Tell me a little bit about the artwork, the idea behind it, and the artist.
Well, this was done by Zay, Polish guy. We've worked with him. I think this is the fourth cover he's done with us. We just told him what the songs were about. We gave him the words to the songs, gave him the title of the record, and told him what the songs were about. He did the rest. We just turned him loose.
That is incredible. It turned out amazing.
Well, we were pretty happy. I don't know if you've seen all the artwork on the inside as well as the cover, but it
No, I
was
haven't.
there's like 13, 14 full-size illustrations that he did. They're all as good or better than the cover. The cover's the nicest one. The rest are, quite horrific, I would say.
Oh wow, that's a good marketing point now, because now people are like, oh, now I have to go out and get it so I can see what's on the inside.
Yes, exactly. That's why liner notes have been included on Nile records for many years, is because you know what? The fan that actually plunks down his hard-earned cash to support the band, they deserve the good stuff. So they get the good stuff.
I agree with that viewpoint. That's well said and well done. And in speaking of fans, you guys have a legion of fans. You guys have an incredible career, an incredible discography that goes with that incredible career. Do you ever, when you're not too busy thinking about death and the demise of all of us, do you take some time to think about your achievements and what Nile has done and what you have done?
Not really. We're more concerned about whatever it is we're doing right now, rather than necessarily dwelling on things that are in the rearview mirror. Yeah, I don't think it's healthy to spend too much time looking back, other than to go, well, this is where we started, and this was how we got here, and trying to remain a little bit grounded. Like, I know that I'm a kid, came from Greenville, South Carolina, which is a nowhere town in the middle of the Bible Belt. I got where I am now through hard work, not by going, uh, you know, whatever. I don't even know what people think. We got here because we worked hard, and that's what we're going to stick to. Stay focused on the job.
And you're working, I mean, this is going to be the band's 10th album coming out. Quite the milestone. Considering that you're keeping yourself always focused on what's ahead and not necessarily looking at the review mirror, when it comes to making the 10th album, is it easier or is only becoming harder and harder?
I read a review once where someone said Nile's worst enemy is their own back catalog. And I think that a lot of times, once a band gets going, there's expectations. Expectations the band puts on themselves, expectations that listeners and fans have. And that's a tough thing to, you know, it's a big wall. It's a humongous obstacle to just making music and enjoying music, like putting on the record and enjoying the record for what it actually is, right? Because no matter what we do, we're not going to sound exactly like we sounded 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. We're different people. We've lived life and, you know, it's just going to be different. No matter what you do, there's always expectations that the listener's going to have. Like someone who started listening to the band with Annihilation of the Wicked, that's their reference point. It's their frame of understanding. So this record is not that record. It's a different record. Hopefully, you know, people can just enjoy it for what it is. Because it's not whatever it isn't. It is what it actually is.
This is actually what happens to be. You worked in your own studio putting this record together. It's not the first time that you do that. What advantages do you see clearly in having not only your own studio but working on this record within your own space?
Well, one is the hotel bill. Um, if you're
Big
working
one.
somewhere else, that's a big part of the budget is how much money you got to spend to live in a hotel and just, you know, exist for however long you're working on the record. Plus, when you're at somebody else's studio, you're paying by the hour. So it's like very restrictive in terms of if you want to try that other idea, you may or may not have time to fuck around with it. Whereas when you're working at home, you're not answering to anybody. You're just making music. And if an idea needs longer, you can take it. If idea needs less time, well, I'm not wasting time on it. Some people think that's a double-edged sword, and I can see where it would be. But I like working on my own terms. Like when I know it's time to stop, I fucking stop. And it doesn't matter what time it is. Or if I need to keep working, I do. So that part's good. The other part is if when you're home, you're also at home. So if the water main outside of my front yard bursts open and there's a fountain of water going like this, well, somebody's got to do something about it.
And that somebody is you.
Well, it was my wife who ran out there and called the plumber, but of course it stopped to work on the record. Of course it did.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known, right? I was in here busy working away and disasters going on out front. And she didn't even interrupt me. She let me keep working, but you got to stop. You
at some
can't.
point in time, you do have to lend a hand, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, she's pretty good at taking care of stuff, but still, there's all kind of stuff that needs to be done when you're home.
That is true, but and maybe part of that double-edged sword, like you mentioned, is the fact that having that time, having the ability to dwell on some things that maybe require a little bit more dwelling on, does that kind of turn you into a little bit of a perfectionist at times, or that's never the case?
We were already perfectionists. So there's some sort of self crucifixion that happens when you're in somebody else's studio, paying by the hour, by the minute sometimes. And you could get that thing better if you had more time. But when you don't, you don't. So then you have to live with something that you could do better. That's tough, especially when someone else goes, "Hey, man, this part right here, what were you thinking?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, man. I agree with you. That could have been better." Or, "Why did we even do this?" I don't know.
I love that thought process. I mean, first of all, I love the fact that you read, going back a little bit, but I love the fact that you read a comment on a review and it stuck with you.
Well, occasionally somebody says something that you can take at face value and it's helpful. Not all comments are useful.
Or wanted.
As much as I'd like every single person to be, useful and constructive in whatever they have to say, it doesn't actually work out that way in process. So it's kind of another one of those double-edged swords. If you care about what people have to say, that is helpful in some instances and very harmful in other instances.
You need to find a balance somehow, because there is some positivity, but I think these days there's probably more negativity than positivity that comes with it.
Well, that's very succinctly said.
At least that's how I see it. And not only you guys have this album coming out on August 23rd, a little bit later down the road, you have announced a massive co-headlining tour starting off in January of 2025. It seems like it's just around the corner, really, with 6 Feet Under. How did that opportunity came about for the two of you to tag along on this massive co-headlining tour?
Well, they have the same booking agent.
That helps.
So that was a phone call. They were like, "Hey, you want to tour?" I said, well, sure. We've toured with them a bunch of times in the past, so why not?
That easy.
That easy.
Wow, that easy. How do you prepare for a tour of that length? Because it's a lengthy tour.
Well, uh,
Nobody's going to be home to help with the water main if it breaks again. So
all that's true. I'm thankful I have some really good friends that are, I've known for many, many years. I don't have like a gazillion friends, but I got a few really good ones. So if something happens, I got a few friends that care. That's helpful. A lot of stuff that happens in life you can't fucking prepare for. Like recently got sick overseas. Can't plan on that. So like as far as like the band being ready, that's a simple matter of, people show up for rehearsal, we work our asses off. That's like something you can have control over. Things like the bus breaking down or somebody getting sick or a pandemic. These are things out of your control that you can't prepare for. And the amount of shit that can go sideways in a 6.5 week tour is mind boggling, and you can't plan for any of it. All you can do is show up rehearsed, hopefully reasonably healthy, try to stay healthy.
well said. I going back to the friends on one hand there, I always tell people that I have a lot of acquaintances, but very few friends.
I think that's real, right?
Yeah, some of my acquaintances did not appreciate when I said that because I guess they thought they were friends. but it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's one of
Yeah.
those. The half either is glass half full or half empty. Now, you've toured many years. You've been on the road forever. You know exactly what it takes, like you said, to be successful on the road. There's things you can control, there's things you can't control. But how different do you see the current North American touring landscape versus even 5 years ago?
It's a whole different ballgame. The cost of touring is just insane. Dude, like everything that you need to do while you're on tour is now nearly cost prohibitive. Yeah, just the amount of money that our overhead is every week is like, dude, people can't even fathom the cost of what it takes to put a band of people on a tour bus, send them across the country for a month, 2 months. That's just insane. Like the the accounting is mind raping. I don't recommend it for anybody.
You hear so many bands complaining about it, specifically bands that are coming from overseas to tour in North America, because obviously they also have the additional visa costs and all of that shit. But what you're telling me is not just life is not just expensive for bands coming from overseas, even for bands that are located here, the cost is still outrageous.
Yeah. And all those same bills that you have at home do not magically disappear when you go out on tour. So, yeah, a lot of people don't think about that. That's one of the toughest things to sustain is you can't just go out on tour. You have to go out on tour and make it worth your time, or else, you know, the people that at the bank who expect the mortgage to be paid, Duke Power, right? All the utilities, hungry kids. Um, dude,
It's tough. Do
it's
you see a light at the end of this horrendous tunnel?
this is a larger economic question. I think the economy of the last, you know, 5, 10 years has been headed down a path that seems unsustainable. So it's not just people playing music that are looking at, like, how on earth do we keep going, but everybody. It's not like isolated just to music. Like, where is tomorrow? What's there going to be 10 years from now for the average American worker? Just scary thoughts.
Yeah, and it's one that I don't think anybody really has an answer for, or at least see any sort of positivity somewhere down the line. I just think that we're in this downward spiral, and it just doesn't seem to end. It just continues to spiral. Um, it's crazy.
Yeah, the whole feeling of we're living in end times, right? I mean, death metal is rife with this. The apocalypse is coming, right? This feels very real, right? And you're not crazy if you look around at the world around us and that's what you see. Well, you're not crazy. That's what we're facing. So it's not comforting.
I just think maybe death metal has caught up to the topics within death metal finally caught up to the world around us. We're living in a death metal album.
We are living in a death metal album. So is this art imitating life or life imitating art?
I think there's a
Right?
little bit of column A and a little bit of column B.
I would agree.
I think that's where we at. I got to ask you one last question. I asked this. I talked to Paul actually of Cannibal Corpse last year when they were releasing their album about the possibility one day in the future of Cannibal Corpse playing a halftime show at a Super Bowl. We saw what Gojira did for the Olympics. Do you think uh, we're closer of seeing an iconic death metal band like Nile, Cannibal Corpse, Obituary playing maybe not a halftime show at a Super Bowl, but something of that magnitude.
I think you're asking a magnanimous question. My wife said the same thing when she saw the Gojira thing. She said, "You have to see this. Does this mean that death metal is becoming more mainstream? And will we see more extreme forms of entertainment becoming normalized?" Wow. One would not have thought so. Like in 1985 or 6 or whenever the fuck it was that I first saw a young Morbid Angel playing a completely blasphemous form of metal, my mind went, this is like unlistenable for the majority of humanity. Who's going to listen to this? It's genius, right? But how on earth is this like acceptable music to the populace at large? Right? And as death metal evolved and slowly became more acceptable, this was like a conceptual blasphemy. This is supposed to be unacceptable. This thing that is supposed to be unacceptable on its face. Music so extreme that it's not supposed to exist, yet it exists. And the more it exists, the more accepted it becomes. So is this a monster that will eat itself? At what point do you have a normalized Cannibal Corpse that is perfectly acceptable, that they play in old folks' homes?
That
Right? When it's time to play bingo at the old folks' home, and they put on some Cannibal Corpse, and which was the equivalent of my grandparents listening to the polka or the waltz or banjo music or whatever. At what point? And what does this say about our world when something as that should not exist is normalized? And we see this all across our world. I mean, look at the state of American politics. Things are normalized that should not even be like allowed to exist. So I don't know, man. I think we are living in the last gasp of civilization.
I think the more I think about that question and now listen to your answer, the more I start to realize that maybe, just maybe, at one point in time, the extreme was extreme, but we're so desensitized to the extreme because the extreme in our lives has become the norm that now Cannibal Corpse at a bingo hall, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility.
It sounds ridiculous to say it, doesn't it?
It
Like,
does, but it's becoming a little bit more closer to a possible reality at some point in time. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around it.
the thing that should not be,
It
right?
is.
We are seeing it.
It's happening. We're living it to a certain degree. Karl, thank you very much for your time today, man. This was an absolute pleasure. What a blast to talk to you about the record, about death metal, about all of these kind of things, about your water pipes bursting. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. All the best with the release, all the best with the tour in 2025. And I hope to see you guys at some point north of the border playing some shows in Canada. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, brother.
All right, man. All the best. Take care.
Take care.